what is a multi-agent system? Going back here again to IBM, they define the concept of a multi-agent system as a group of multiple agents working together, performing tasks to achieve a certain goal. Okay. So we talked about the modules, we talked about the agents, putting a body, a concept of a person on top of the module to create an agent. Now we are going to the second layer of collaboration, that is having AI agents working together to perform tasks. And to be honest, this is my favorite part of AI because it's the moment where we start going really close into our human behavior in society. The way we work together, the way we divide the tasks, the way we break complex problems into smaller blocks and we distribute them in a collaborative way, in a hierarchical way, depending on the tools. So this is a very good opportunity for everyone that has a mindset more close to processes instead of developing. This is a very good way to start increasing their knowledge going into multi-agent systems, because this will be one of the critical paths in evolving AI in the next months and in the next years. This concept of multi-agent systems, they can work in a very different way. So there are different patterns and different designs where we can make agents work with each other. Exactly in the way we do this in the real world. We can have patterns that are more collaborative. For example, when we are doing a research with a team, we can have each person of the team doing a research of a certain subtopic and then aggregating everything. We can have a more hierarchical design where we have a manager that picks a project and delegates different tasks into different team members, but then she also controls the outcome of those tasks. So there are different designs we can apply, right? And these different designs, personally, I do like to study them, the different architectures that we can have. And in this case, LangChain or LangGraph, they have really good videos showing of how we can implement the different designs here. And for example, you guys can see here, we may have the network, that was what I'm talking about, the collaborative, the networking, or it's called also the blackboard pattern. We can have the supervisor or the orchestrator, that's what we are going to talk today. And we can have also others, for example, more hierarchical, where we can have different levels of orchestrator or supervisors inside of it, or we can customize our own design pattern. Okay, but these are some known patterns. We can also have another one that more close to the pub/sub pattern, where basically it's a bit similar to the supervisor, but the supervisor doesn't act as a supervisor. He basically acts like a broadcaster. Whenever he receives an input, he distributes or he calls all agents with that attribute, and then each agent decides what to do, what the message. Or we can have, for example, simply the router. There is also the router pattern that is basically similar to supervisor, but the router node or the router agent, he does not receive back the results. He simply redirects messages to the different agents and they continue the process. So the router doesn't do anything after that. But we will today be focusing here on the supervisor, and we will see that more after. So there are here some questions we might ask. Okay, so how do we know when we need to have a multi-agent system or simply a single agent? If an agent already has tools and has intelligence to do that, why don't we simply use an agent and ask him to perform things? If you might recall a bit back what I was talking, if an agent resembles a bit a person, you might see that in our world, in our job, normally we don't have only a person to do complex tasks, because first, or the task requires different roles and different knowledges that that person doesn't have, and so we need to distribute the different roles to the different experts, or the task is so complex in terms of the chain of subtasks that are needed, that we need to break them. Even the person needs to break the job into different phases. Okay, for example, writing a master thesis. One person can write a master thesis, but most likely she will not do it that on a row completely without planning different phases, doing different jobs. Okay, so normally when you are doing a master thesis, you start investigating, you start collecting information, so that is a task per se. Then you start writing the master thesis, that's another task, and despite the fact that they are being done by the same person, they are very different. So we can also use the concept here of a multi-agent system to do that. And you may say, oh, but you are not using different agents, you are using the same agent. That's true, but we are breaking tasks, different tasks for the same agent in an organized way. So we can say that is a complex system. We can say it's a multi-agent system or not, but it's also a useful use case when considering it. So how should we think about it? When we are checking a task, a different requirement, so when we want AI to solve a problem, we can ask some questions to help us determine if it is a single agent or a multi-agent system. And you can ask something like, would this job that I want right now to be AI performing it, would this job be done only by one person or by a team? Because most likely, if it would be done by a team, it means that it would need to be also performed by a multi-agent system, because it's more easy for you to divide the tasks of the different team members into different agents, and it's more easy to replicate the way the team would work in the same way that the multi-agent system works between the agents. Then you can also ask, is the task a simple task or does it need to be decomposed? For example, the example I was giving about the master thesis, basically delivering a master thesis is a very complex task that can be decomposed in smaller tasks, and even those smaller tasks can be decomposed in even smaller tasks. So it's a perfect example of a task that would need to be decomposed, and in that case we can also look at it into a multi-agent system. And there is also here a question that I do believe it's important, because it might make us see a bit different the agents versus the persons. That is the fact, you might ask if the person that is performing a certain task, if that person has a multi-role mindset or not. For example, imagine that you have a team member or you have a project where you have the same person reading the requirements and specifying some requirements and developing. Okay, the same person is doing those two roles. Okay, you might say, oh, it's one person, so I just need a single agent. But that person is basically working as two different persons, a business analyst and a developer. So the two mindsets are really different. The mindset that the person needs to have when she is analyzing the requirements, the user stories, and writing them, it's a completely different mindset than when the person is developing. And anyone that does that understands what I'm saying. So this basically means that if we are going to build an agents on top of it, and we want this to be really effective, it would be more handy if we also consider those two situations in a multi-agent system. Okay, having an agent more related with the development phase and another agent more related with the business analyst phase. Okay, so this helps knowing when we want to have, or when we should have, a single agent or a multi-agent system. Okay, so we talked here about the what is the a multi-agent system, the different patterns. We are going to focus today more on the orchestrated pattern, and you can also find a lot of tools on the internet that helps build this concept of multi-agent system. So we have LangGraph, it's one of my favorites. You have Swarm, and that it's also sponsored by the OpenAI, or it belongs to the OpenAI. Then you have Crew AI, and from Microsoft you have AutoGen. Those four tools, they can be used to create multi-agent systems. Each one of them have their own way of doing. Some give more freedom than others, but those are some of the tools that exist on the market. Of course, there are others.